What's up, everybody? We are back with another product from Dynavap. And this is something that everyone in the community has been waiting quite a long time for, the armored cap. It is like a cap, except bigger and beefier. We'll go over just the basics of the cap's construction first. So basically what they did is they took a stainless steel jacket, machined a cap shape out of it, and then took a normal cap, cut the digger outer off, and jammed it in there. Or is what it seems like they did. If you look very carefully in there, you can see it is just the top portion of the cap press fit inside of an armored cap. The armored cap by Dynavap. Makes sense. It looks like the top is solid and same click discs on the inside. The captivations and the crimp on the outside seem to be just aesthetic, as the press fit part on the inside has captivations as well. Alright, and that's basically it. It functions the same way as a Dynavap cap. It has two click discs inside that will click when it is at temperature. Some of the things that Dynavap mentioned about this release is that it is to incorporate a no spin design, and we'll see that and put it to the test as I have to make this video. A couple general notes about this cap for fitment. It is a very thick cap. So gone are the days where you used to be able to adjust the cap simply by pinching it. When it showed up, it was very tight. Pushing it on the cap like this, I felt it wanting to scratch the tip, which is okay with the 5-fin because it kind of screwed in. Even that was very tight and I could hear it scraping on there. So one thing I did was I took my trusty pointer tool here, I put the end in like this, and I simply just pried it apart a little bit, very gently, resting it on the captivation and just slightly pushing it. After I had done this to my cap to get that slight adjustment, which is not reversible. So as you adjust the armored cap, please be very careful that you're doing a little bit at a time because you cannot undo what you just did. After I had already adjusted my cap, I got a good tip from one of the Dynastaff employees on the Dynaverse that you can actually take your M device, put it in the end here, and do the same prying action. Now, again, please be very careful as undoing that can be very hard, if not impossible. Also, with an M device, I would be okay doing that with, because if the end got scuffed up a little bit, no big deal. If my device was anodized or PVD'd, or this was a fancy Omni device, I definitely would not suggest using it to lever open the cap. Another note on fitment. The armored cap, for some reason, the digger outer is just a little too long. So if you have your tip on your favorite wood stem, be very, very careful, because if you look here, you'll see that the digger outer actually touches the wood stem, or on a standard M device, it overlaps that lower O-ring. So I'll be very interested to see what happens over time to that O-ring and how often people will have to change out that O-ring if they use an armored cap on an M. For the wood device, there were reports on the Dynaverse that this was actually singeing the wood stem. Please be very careful using the armored cap on a wood stem. It was the same thing with the Bonger, except the Bonger, since it's high temp silicone, actually handled the armored cap heat pretty well. I've been running this setup here, which is a standard 5-fin titanium tip, armored cap, and the Bonger through a dry glass piece. I haven't had any burns or marks or singes or weird silicone smell coming up from here. So safe to say, this is a safe option to use the armored cap in a way where it's not damaging to anything. Let's move on to heating. Here it is. The Dynavap cap that requires no spin. While that is accurate, somewhat misleading. It is not like other armored options on the market where you can just point it at one spot and not move the torch at all. Because if you do that with a single flame torch like the PB207 and you keep it static, especially where we're gonna heat, and I'll talk about that in a second, but for now we'll just talk about heating in general, that if you hold the PB207 single flame, we're on the digger outer to get a full extraction, at about a 53-second heat up, this will start to glow red. Now, Dynavap hasn't said much about that yet, but what I do know is that when metals start to glow red, that's when their composition starts to change and potential off-gassing happens. So I'm not a huge fan of letting the metal glow red. If it can actually be damaging, I guess that's to be determined. That being said, if you are using a single flame, make sure that you're using a single flame like the PB207 because most torches that you get from the gas station are not meant to be on for any longer than a couple seconds to light a cigar. So 53 seconds is actually a really long time to have a torch on. The PB207, since it is a more robust industrial style torch, it handles that time period fantastically. When you do light the torch, you're going to turn the flame up a little bit from where you would on a normal Dynavap cap, and you're going to start pointing it right about the D on the digger outer. And what I do is I slowly brush the PB207 back and forth like that to avoid making any one spot too hot. This is exactly like the Dynavap cap, where up here, light roast, down here, dark roast. This is where that 53-second heat up happens. And that's how I was doing it when I first used the cap, is I was just aiming there using a PB207. And it got me to a single hit dark extraction. Then it hit me. That's taking a long time. Why not just upgrade the torch to the Blazer Firefox, which is exactly what I did. So I'm getting a very similar experience on the end with how dark of a roast I'm getting, and a much faster, easier heat up. And it's the same thing, the same theory with the Firefox that it is the PB207. I just point it at the D and slowly kind of go back and forth in this area. The only thing with the Firefox is you really have to hold the Firefox further away from the cap. You want to be right at the tip of the flame. If you can imagine for a second, this is the tip of the blue flame, and then you have the inner blue flame. So there is some distance between the inner blue flame and the very tip of the flame. You want to be just at the very tip of the flame doing a brushing motion like this with the Firefox. We've done enough talk about how to use it, what to use it with, so let's go ahead and give it a try. Alright, now that I've gotten some of my favorite flour loaded up, we're going to get my glass piece ready, and we're going to give this thing a rip. Alright, here we go. I have my Firefox on pretty much the lowest setting there, and really just pointing the very tip of the flame at the D and wiggling it back and forth so it doesn't get too hot. First click, second click, all right, what a hit. That was a heavy hit. I can tell by the taste that was right on the line before pyrolyzation. I definitely didn't push it over, but we're going to take a look at that ABV just to make sure. So with the 5-fin tip, I do a screwing motion because the captivations play really well into the grooves on the side. And look at that. A nice dark roast, definitely a little darker than I typically like to go, but that's just me. The armor cap with the torch, it took me a little bit to get used to it. There is definitely a learning curve, so it is like relearning a Dynavap cap all over again. But there you have it, the armor cap by Dynavap. Wait, 1 second. You thought that was it? There's more. What is the armor cap made out of? Well, good news. It's stainless steel, which means it works inside of induction heaters. What? That was a cool feature that Dynavap really took into consideration, is that a lot of users like to use induction. There is one caveat to that, though. The induction heaters that this fits into are, I don't want to say few and far between, but there are not a lot. The armored cap is 12 millimeter in outer diameter, so there are some VHBs that it fits, and it definitely fits in the wand, and it fits in the FFP if you take the glass cup out. So what I did is I put a little bit of cork underneath the coil to make sure I blocked the contact screws so the cap couldn't touch these screws and short out my device. Very important. So now that I've let you guys know that it works with induction, let's go ahead and give it a rip. When doing this out of a water pipe, I really take a little special note to pack my flower in just a little bit more than I do to really make sure that these channels at the top are open. Put the cap on there, put that in there. I turn it up to 60 for the armored cap, which is a little higher than I usually go, but I figured that extra mass needs a little bit of extra power. So I just put it on there, let it rip. First click, second click. All right. With the induction heater, not really doing surfing the clicks like I really like to do because I wanted to show you what it's like going just to the clicks. It is still pretty light, so we could probably do one more run out of that. Next time, I might turn the induction heater up a little bit or just keep to my normal method of surfing the clicks to really milk this. Now that both cooldown clicks happen, we're going to go ahead and just try and rush this back up to heat. First click, second click. All right, let's check out that second cycle of off the induction heater. Man, definitely not as dark as the torch, but that was a really good hit and had a lot more flavor than the torch did. So the last note I will say about the armored cap that might be somewhat different to the more seasoned Dynavap users is that with the original Dynavap cap, if you inhaled harder, the cap would cool down so fast that the temperature would sustain or go down. With the armored cap, because it sustains so much heat, that if you are really riding the line and you inhale too hard, you run the risk of combustion. That being said, you can really play with this added factor of how hard you are inhaling to raise the temperature inside the oven. Pro tip for those of you more seasoned at Dynavaps. And with all that being said, that's all she wrote for the Armored Cap by Dynavap. And as always, stay lifted.